Have you ever noticed how some words feel like they carry an invisible warning sign? Words that people avoid saying aloud, almost as if uttering them would unleash chaos? It's strange, isn't it? We live in a world where we celebrate openness and honesty, yet there are certain expressions that we tuck away, careful not to let them slip. What if I told you there are 3 such words, simple, ordinary words, that almost everyone avoids saying openly because they touch something deep inside us, something uncomfortable and rarely acknowledged? These words exist quietly beneath our conversations, shaping what we dare to admit about ourselves and others. It's like walking into a room and sensing a tension you can't quite place. The air feels thick with unspoken truths. This is more common than we think. And the fascinating part is that these forbidden words don't just appear out of nowhere. They're connected to the unseen parts of our minds, the parts Carl Jung explored when he delved into the human psyche. Jung didn't just talk about dreams or symbols. He pointed us toward the raw edges of our self-awareness, those places where denial and truth collide. Let me be honest. I once found myself caught in this very trap without realizing it. It was during a project at a graphic design firm in Brooklyn back in late 2022. The deadline was tight, tensions were high, and my colleague Jessica, a sharp-witted illustrator, kept brushing off our concerns by muttering one of those forbidden words under her breath. At first, I thought she was just frustrated, but then I realized, no one else wanted to say it either. There was this collective silence around that word, like it was too close to a crack in the foundation none of us wanted to acknowledge. The irony is that these forbidden words aren't vulgar or shocking. On the contrary, they're painfully human. They expose vulnerabilities or confront realities we'd rather ignore because admitting them feels like losing control. Jung believed that what we reject in ourselves tends to find expression through indirect means, dreams, slips of tongue, emotional reactions, until we finally face it consciously or let it fester unconsciously. So today, let's gently unpack these 3 taboo words, not to shame anyone for avoiding them but to understand why they exist and how bringing them into light can actually free us from hidden burdens. It's not about forcing yourself to blurt out uncomfortable truths at dinner parties, please don't do that, but about recognizing what these words represent within your inner world. Before diving deeper, if you find this kind of exploration intriguing, where psychology meets everyday life, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so we can continue these conversations together. Now, here's where things get interesting. The very first forbidden word is failure. Yes, failure. The word alone seems simple enough but carries a weight nearly everyone tries to dodge out loud. Why is failure so taboo? Because admitting failure feels like exposing a crack in our carefully curated image of competence and worthiness. Think about how often people reframe failure with euphemisms. It was just a learning experience, or I'm pivoting, or that didn't go as planned. All valid phrases, but beneath those softer terms lurks the raw experience many want to hide, the sting of not meeting expectations, whether imposed by ourselves or others. Remember Maria? She's a 34-year-old teacher from Chicago who recently shared with me how she quit her stable job during the pandemic intending to start an online tutoring business. She poured her heart into creating content and marketing herself but after months saw minimal progress. When friends asked how things were going, Maria hesitated before saying she was exploring options, rather than admitting she felt like a complete failure. This hesitation isn't uncommon because failure feels personal, even though it's fundamentally part of growth. In Man and His Symbols, 1964, Jung emphasizes that confronting uncomfortable truths about oneself, including failures, is essential for becoming whole rather than fragmented by denial. Here's why this matters. Avoiding speaking about failure out loud can trap us in silent isolation. We pretend everything is fine while internally wrestling with disappointment or shame alone. This disconnect creates invisible barriers between ourselves and others, a quiet suffering disguised as perfection. But what if admitting failure could relieve rather than increase pain? Not broadcasting every stumble on social media. That's another story, but allowing yourself the quiet space to honestly name setbacks without judgment. You might try this small exercise. Next time you notice yourself avoiding talking about something you struggled with or gave up on, pause and acknowledge internally. I failed at this. Say it silently or write it down without adding excuses or softeners. Notice any feelings that arise: discomfort, relief, guilt, Then try sharing one small failure with someone trusted, not as seeking sympathy but simply acknowledging reality. This practice isn't about turning your life into a highlight reel of defeats but integrating parts often swept under the rug so they lose their power over you. By naming failure openly, even privately, you begin dismantling its taboo status. Interestingly enough, embracing failure does not mean glorifying mistakes blindly. It means accepting our imperfect humanity instead of denying it through silence or euphemisms. I once heard from Daniel, a freelance copywriter living in Austin, who said he would obsessively edit his work drafts before sending them because he feared being labeled a failure if mistakes slipped through. After trying this acknowledgement exercise, he realized his fear wasn't about actual work quality but internalizing harsh criticism from childhood teachers who equated errors with worthlessness. Daniel started sharing his drafts earlier with colleagues and received supportive feedback instead of judgment he anticipated, and oddly enough felt freer creatively afterward. So here lies the paradox. Refusing to say failure aloud can chain us tighter than facing it head-on gently does. That makes me wonder, what other simple words are we avoiding because they threaten our self-image? If any part of this resonates with you, perhaps some unspoken struggles around personal setbacks, I'd love for you to share your thoughts below whenever you feel ready. It's amazing how just putting words on something hidden can ripple into unexpected lightness. To wrap up this first step, and stay tuned for more, we've seen how failure operates as one such powerful forbidden word because it confronts identity directly yet remains necessary for growth when acknowledged honestly even in whispers within ourselves. Give yourself permission today to experiment quietly with naming failures, not as defeat but as authentic pieces of your story no one else has lived exactly like you have. And while we're on authenticity, well, there are two more words hiding behind this curtain I'm eager to explore next time. Words that dance around fear and acceptance in ways equally surprising and illuminating. For now, maybe take a moment tonight before sleep, or during an ordinary coffee break, to notice which silent words linger just beneath your speech and what happens when you give them room without panic or judgment. After all, becoming aware is always the first step toward gentle transformation, even if slow and imperfect, as life rarely moves otherwise. And since this channel aims exactly at those meaningful slow steps into self-understanding, with no pressure or fancy jargon, subscribing helps keep these conversations alive as we continue peeling back layers few dare mention aloud yet everyone carries inside quietly. So yeah, failure. 3 little letters packed with stories untold until spoken softly somewhere safe within your mind or between trusted company. That's where change begins quietly without fanfare but deeply enough to shift how you see yourself moving forward. Isn't it curious how something avoided often holds keys instead of locks? If nothing else today sparks curiosity about what else might be silently hushed inside your daily dialogues with yourself, well, that alone counts for progress beyond most casual chats out there claiming easy fixes nobody really finds helpful anyway. And hey, maybe tomorrow's chat will surprise you even more by lifting another veil over those 3 forbidden words shaping much of what we don't say but live through every day unnoticed yet profoundly impactful. Until then, keep noticing those silent spaces between spoken lines. They speak volumes all on their own if only we listen carefully enough. Commenta isua experiencia se alguma vez voce hesitu em dizer, failure, porque parece muito pesado para o momento. Sometimes admitting weight lifts some burden unexpectedly lighter than carrying silence alone. Alias, if diving deeper into these ideas sounds helpful later on, there's a guide I prepared focusing on courageously naming hard truths gently within daily life. It might be useful when you're ready. But for now, thanks for being here, curious enough to explore what most skip over quietly. That silence itself is telling. And so begins. It's funny how once you start noticing the words you shy away from, you begin to catch them in the corners of your conversations, like secret signals your mind is sending out but you're too nervous to decode fully. After all, language isn't just a tool for communication. It's a mirror reflecting what's alive or dormant inside us. So, having unpacked the weighty word, failure, let me introduce the second forbidden word that many avoid saying aloud. Not because it sounds heavy, but because it unsettles our sense of control and exposes the fragility beneath our daily facades. This word is vulnerability. Now, vulnerability isn't about weakness as some mistakenly believe. It's more like standing on a ledge without the protective barrier we usually cling to. There's no shield to hide behind when you admit vulnerability, so it feels risky, like exposing a part of ourselves that society often tells us to mask or fix immediately. We prefer phrases like, "I'm working on my confidence," or "I'm building resilience," instead of directly admitting, "I feel vulnerable." Let me tell you about Jason, a software engineer in Seattle who had always been the go-to problem solver at his startup. He was known for delivering results and rarely letting stress show. But beneath that calm exterior was a constant fear. Admitting vulnerability meant risking being seen as less capable or dependable. In early 2023, after a major product launch failed due to unforeseen bugs, Jason found himself overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't quite name at first, frustration mixed with shame and self-doubt. However, instead of sharing these feelings with his team or friends, he kept quiet and doubled down on work to compensate. The irony? His silence only intensified his isolation and fatigue. What changed? One day during a casual coffee chat with an old friend from college, someone outside of his immediate work circle, Jason confessed how scared he felt about failing not just the project but letting down people relying on him. That admission felt like stepping off that ledge without a safety net at first, but surprisingly brought relief. His friend didn't judge or offer quick fixes, instead, they simply listened. This simple act of naming vulnerability shifted something inside Jason. It made space for compassion rather than criticism from himself and others. Here's a practical approach worth trying. Next time you feel the urge to hide discomfort or uncertainty behind jokes or busy schedules, pause and consider saying to yourself, "I am vulnerable right now." Try writing this down privately without elaboration or justification, just acknowledging that feeling plainly. Then choose one person you trust enough to say this softly out loud, not as a grand confession but as an honest update on your inner state. You might be surprised by what happens next. Rather than rejection, there may be unexpected openness or connection because vulnerability has this paradoxical power to invite closeness rather than distance. Of course, this doesn't mean broadcasting every insecurity indiscriminately. Please don't turn your work meetings into therapy sessions, but gently allowing yourself small doses of truthfulness where it feels safe. It reminds me how Jung explored archetypes representing our inner attitudes toward exposure, the persona masks we wear versus the authentic self we sometimes fear revealing fully. Admitting vulnerability cracks open those masks just enough for genuine contact with ourselves and others. And here's something else curious. While many dodge saying vulnerability because it feels uncomfortable in social norms valuing strength and certainty, there's an unspoken hunger for exactly that honesty beneath the surface. Maybe this tension explains why so many online communities around mental wellness have grown lately. Not because people want pity but because they crave spaces where vulnerability can breathe freely without judgment. So why not dip a toe into this idea today? Just acknowledging internal discomfort by naming it, and selectively sharing, can dissolve some invisible walls built by silent fears. That said, let's move gently toward the third forbidden word, a word that often hides behind well-meant advice or cliches but remains largely unsaid because admitting it can challenge core beliefs about control and perfection. This third word is uncertainty. Uncertainty isn't just about not knowing what will happen, it's about confronting the fact that life doesn't fit neatly into plans or predictions. It shakes up our illusion of stability and control, which feels downright scary sometimes. So many conversations revolve around minimizing uncertainty. I have a plan, I know exactly what I'm doing, trust me, it'll be fine. But openly admitting uncertainty can feel like admitting powerlessness, or worse, that we're lost in some way we don't want others to see. Take Sophia, a 28-year-old marketing specialist living in Boston who recently switched careers after feeling stuck for years in jobs she didn't enjoy. When friends asked her about her new path starting in freelance consulting, she'd respond with confident phrases like, "Everything is coming together," even though inside she wrestled daily with doubt and questions about whether she chose wisely or was just postponing failure again. One evening during a video call with her sister, a calming presence who tends to see through facades, Sophia let slip an honest confession. "Honestly, I'm terrified, I don't know what I'm doing." That moment felt like dropping an anchor into deep water, both freeing and terrifying simultaneously. But from there their conversation opened into shared stories of times each had faced unknowns without clear maps yet learned more than expected along the way. Here's something practical that might help if uncertainty feels overwhelming. Try setting aside 5 minutes daily where you intentionally sit with what you don't know instead of rushing to fill gaps with assumptions or reassurance-seeking behaviors. Write down one thing uncertain right now, big or small, without trying to solve it immediately or judge its importance. Notice sensations in your body as you acknowledge this unknown space. Is there tension? Curiosity? Resistance? Practice breathing calmly through these sensations rather than pushing them away. This practice isn't about getting rid of uncertainty. That would be impossible. But learning to coexist with it peacefully rather than reacting impulsively out of fear. Jung pointed out long ago that integrating parts of ourselves we find uncomfortable, including accepting uncertainty, is crucial for psychological wholeness. Pretending certainty when there is none fractures our experience more deeply over time because denial creates inner conflict between reality and appearance. So embracing uncertainty gently helps resolve these tensions by acknowledging life's inherent unpredictability as part of existence rather than personal failure or flaw needing fixing right now. And honestly, in 2024, with rapid changes socially, economically, technologically, we all face collective uncertainties swirling around us constantly whether we talk about them openly or not. Think job markets shifting unexpectedly overnight or new technologies disrupting routines. Recognizing this shared condition softens some isolation caused by pretending everything is fixed when clearly nothing ever stays still forever anyway. By naming uncertainty aloud, even if just quietly within your thoughts, you break its silent hold over your sense of security and become more grounded in present experience instead of chasing impossible guarantees for future outcomes. Connecting back briefly to Jason's story from earlier, the same engineer learned that admitting uncertainty alongside vulnerability helped him connect authentically with his team during crisis moments instead of retreating behind endless problem-solving modes alone. That shift improved collaboration surprisingly fast because people appreciated honest updates more than polished perfectionism masquerading as leadership. To sum up this step, though hopefully not too summarily, recognizing these three words, failure, vulnerability, uncertainty, as valid parts of our language enriches how we understand ourselves beyond mask society encourages wearing endlessly. If any part struck a chord today, as tricky as saying these words might feel, I'd be curious to hear how, or if, you found ways already allowing such admissions safely into your life rhythms below in comments somewhere comfortable for you, even anonymously. There's something profoundly human in quietly naming what haunts us silently. And oddly empowering too when done from kindness toward oneself rather than harsh judgment imposed externally or internally alike. Oh, and speaking candidly here, as much as I wish everyone embraced these ideas instantly. Yeah. Sometimes I still catch myself avoiding saying vulnerability aloud when panic hits unexpectedly, and yes, I'm far from zen. But maybe that's exactly why these conversations matter. They remind us no one has all answers perfectly lined up despite appearances swirling online promising instant fixes we secretly doubt ourselves anyway. By nurturing patience with imperfection while practicing small acts like those exercises mentioned here, you might find gradually those forbidden words lose their grip over time until they become ordinary parts of your honest speech. And then maybe life itself feels less like walking on brittle glass all the time. Speaking of which, if exploring how to gently bring these difficult truths into daily life sounds useful later on, I quietly keep materials aimed at supporting thoughtful self-awareness without pressure. Anyone should rush through healing stages awkwardly forced by external expectations. But no rush needed here, just curiosity welcomed anytime because real change tends not arrive announced dramatically but unfolds subtly through consistent tiny acknowledgments made safely over time until something shifts fundamentally inside. So take care amid whatever unpredictable moments come next, and notice how naming those hidden words softly inside yourself sparks fresh awareness slowly growing stronger beyond silence imposed artificially within or around us. And since sharing real stories anchors abstract ideas firmly into everyday living, I want again to invite anyone moved by this conversation today. Feel free commenting below anything related. From moments resisting honesty with yourself through times surprise relief followed actual admission aloud. Those little ripples matter more than big declarations shouted off rooftops precisely because they happen quietly between breaths within normal days layered one atop another. After all, aren't those layers where real human transformation most often begins? Thanks again for walking partway through revealing shadows, none too easy, facing directly yet so vital, inviting light gently upon. Looking forward next time, unveiling last piece hidden behind these three potent silent words, shaping much unseen emotional terrain beneath speech. Until then, may unexpected courage arise softly within moments seemingly ordinary enough, where truth waits patiently ready once given room, without rush nor fear. Commenta. I say, uncertainty ever felt like an unwelcome guest settling inside when facing big decisions, or if sharing vulnerability openly surprised you by changing dynamics unexpectedly? For me, those stories keep unfolding, endlessly fascinating. And by the way, subscribing keeps us connected on journeys peeling back silent layers most skip yet deeply carry everywhere every day anyway. There's a peculiar kind of silence that surrounds certain words, not just because they're difficult to say, but because they threaten the delicate story we tell ourselves about who we are. We've explored failure, vulnerability, and uncertainty, words that quietly shape so much of our inner dialogue. Yet, as I was reflecting on these, a fourth word kept surfacing in my mind. It's not as loudly avoided as the others, but it carries its own weight, a subtle resistance that keeps us from embracing it fully. That word is dependency. Now, dependency isn't often openly discussed because it brushes against our deepest fears of weakness and loss of autonomy. In societies that prize independence and self-sufficiency, admitting to needing someone else, or something else, can feel like betraying personal strength. There's this unspoken script that says you must have all your ducks in a row, stand tall on your own feet, and never really admit when you lean on others too much. Yet dependency is an intrinsic part of being human. It's woven into our survival from birth onwards. Infants depend entirely on caregivers. Friendships depend on mutual trust. Creative work depends on inspiration and sometimes collaboration. But admitting dependency feels risky because it demands humility and the willingness to be vulnerable in ways that go beyond admitting feelings or uncertainties. It calls us to confront our interconnectedness honestly. Let me share an experience from last fall involving Grace, a mid-level manager at a nonprofit in Atlanta who was navigating burnout quietly for months. Grace had always prided herself on being the strong one at work, the person who handled crises without breaking a sweat and rarely asked for help. But the truth was different. She felt overwhelmed juggling tasks and emotional responsibilities. What changed was an unexpected conversation with her mentor during a routine check-in. When Grace confessed how tired she felt juggling everything alone, her mentor simply said, "You don't have to do this by yourself." That simple statement cracked open something inside her. Grace realized she had been equating asking for help with failure or inadequacy, and that belief isolated her unnecessarily. The exercise here is deceptively simple but powerful. Try reflecting on areas in your life where you hesitate to ask for support out of fear of seeming weak or too dependent. Write down one situation where you could reach out for advice, emotional support, or practical help, but you hold back. Next step. Take a small action toward accepting that dependency is natural. It might be texting a friend honestly about needing company after a tough day, or delegating a task at work instead of shouldering everything alone. Observe how this act feels inside. Is there relief? Discomfort? Pride? Shame? By acknowledging dependency openly, even privately, you begin dismantling internalized myths about independence being the only marker of strength. This shift doesn't mean losing yourself or becoming passive. Rather, it opens space for authentic connection and shared resilience, both essential ingredients for sustainable well-being. Thinking back to Jung's insights, he saw the self not as isolated but as part of larger systems, including relationships with others and unconscious collective patterns influencing behavior beyond conscious control. Recognizing dependency honestly helps bridge gaps between these parts instead of fragmenting experience through denial or overcompensation. And here's something else worth pondering: modern life bombards us with images glorifying relentless self-reliance. Yet underneath, many people feel lonelier or more depleted than ever. A paradox calling for re-examination not just individually but culturally. So embracing dependency gently stands as an act of courage against prevailing narratives promising perfection through isolation. Now, shifting gears toward wrapping all these threads together. Imagine sitting by a quiet window late at night. The city lights flicker softly outside while inside your mind turns over these words we rarely speak aloud yet carry closely. failure, vulnerability, uncertainty, dependency. They're like 4 silent guests around your internal table. Sometimes unwelcome visitors keeping you restless. Sometimes teachers offering lessons hard-earned through experience. What if instead of pushing them away or dressing them up in safer language, you simply invited them to stay a while? In doing so, you start weaving an honest conversation within yourself where imperfections aren't enemies but parts waiting to be understood deeply enough to stop controlling you unconsciously. It's not easy. None of this is easy. But there's grace hidden within honesty patiently embraced over time without hurry or harsh judgment. Allow me to suggest another gentle practice before closing here. Write a letter addressed to yourself inviting those 4 forbidden words into dialogue with your daily life. No censoring allowed. What would failure say if given space? How might vulnerability express its needs? What does uncertainty want you to notice? And how could dependency become less scary if met with kindness? This exercise isn't about fixing anything instantly but about developing compassionate awareness, fostering peace amid complexity rather than frantic striving for impossible certainties or perfection. Because ultimately these words represent aspects of what makes us most profoundly human, not broken parts, but signals showing where integration awaits if we dare listen carefully enough amidst noise demanding constant performance and denial. I remember once hearing from Leah, a dancer living in New York City, who described how embracing her own dependency during recovery from injury transformed her sense of self deeply. It wasn't surrender but opening toward wholeness, including support systems previously dismissed as weakness. Her journey resonates because it reveals something crucial often missed by quick fix culture. Lasting change emerges not from power displays but from willingness to acknowledge limits courageously while continuing forward authentically anyway, despite doubts swirling around silently inside like restless shadows seeking light. Not perfect illumination but steady glow enough for next step taken thoughtfully, grounded in reality without illusions masquerading as strength. So here we are now facing those forbidden words no longer as threats whispered behind closed doors but as honest companions guiding nuanced journeys toward fuller presence within life's unpredictable unfolding landscape, marked equally by triumphs and setbacks, mingled inseparably like colors blending imperfectly yet beautifully on canvas, brushed by hands learning steadily how to see clearly through imperfections rather than erase them hastily before anyone notices cracks beneath polished surfaces. If this reflection reaches somewhere real inside you, maybe even stirring reluctance alongside curiosity, I invite you gently into ongoing dialogue with yourself about these silent words shaping much more than surface conversations ever could. And speaking plainly, I don't know exactly where this path leads either. That's part of its raw beauty. But I do know silence won't reveal answers hiding patiently beneath layers, waiting soft exposure amid honest moments, willing enough to meet them halfway without masks needing constant adjustment. That said, feel free sharing any thoughts down below whenever feels right. There's power in knowing we're not alone, wrestling quietly with what feels unspeakable yet profoundly alive within us all somehow. Before signing off completely, I want to leave one last thought. True transformation isn't about erasing what frightens us. It's about learning how to live alongside those fears bravely enough so they lose their grip over choices made unconsciously before awareness dawns, slowly lifting veils once cherished because they seem safer than truth itself. And maybe that slow unveiling makes all the difference between living merely surviving masked lives scripted by avoidance versus living honestly flawed lives authored courageously step by step with all contradictions held tenderly instead of hidden desperately. There's immense freedom there, a freedom few admit seeking openly because freedom itself sometimes masquerades as chaos until experienced personally, intimately enough for perspective shift, deepening far beyond initial discomfort into profound acceptance, rich with possibility never available while silence reigned unchecked, stubbornly reigning supreme behind lips sealed tight. So here's hoping this conversation planted seeds worth nurturing softly among other quiet truths awaiting recognition tucked away beneath everyday chatter too often glossed over hurriedly. Remember, every spoken forbidden word gently released changes narratives held too long captive within hearts craving permission simply to be, despite imperfection present, unvarnished, complex, messy, beautiful human after all. And on that note, may your days ahead carry whispers turned voices, soft yet clear, unveiling new ways, seeing self-shaped compassionately beyond silent prisons built unknowingly inside since earliest breaths taken, shaping who you truly are becoming now, moment by moment unfolding endlessly. Thanks deeply For your presence, curiosity, patience, lending ear today, traveling together through hidden terrains, seldom charted openly yet undeniably central, making life rich, textured, real beyond scripts prescribed externally, endlessly repeated. Commenta I say, any one forbidden word stirred unexpected reflections today, or moments when naming truth aloud shifted something subtle yet significant below surface currents, shaping your story lived uniquely, no one else can tell quite same way. Until next time, keep leaning into those quiet spaces where honesty waits patiently, ready, breathing softly, inviting courage, steadily growing stronger inch by inch, day by day, unfolding naturally, imperfectly, beautifully, simply human. Because there is nothing more radical than choosing truth, even when whispered first silently inside before ever spoken aloud.